عندي 106 سنين 106 سنين الحمد لله.
Welcome to Meet Us on the Abraham Path. I'm Anisa Mehdi, Executive Director of the Abraham Path Initiative. It's good to see so many of you again. Thanks for coming back to our webinar series. And it's great to have so many new viewers joining us today. Welcome to all of you. The Abraham Path Initiative is a US-based not-for-profit, and I want to offer a big shout out to everyone who's joined us that is a donor to our organization. It's great to have you, your support. We wouldn't be here without you. And for those of you that have joined us and are not yet donors, let me tell you a little bit about the organization, and maybe you'll be inspired to join the club, as they say. API, Abraham Path Initiative, was established to develop walking trails so that visitors to the region of Southwest Asia, we'll talk about that in a moment, can really learn about and enjoy and experience the local people and the cultures of the region, the hospitality. Let's take a look at a map, and I want to tell you why we use the term Southwest Asia rather than the Middle East. So you've all seen this part of the world. Southwest Asia is a place. The Middle East is a political construct. It conjures up crisis and conflict, and that is also true in the region. But we believe that as people get to know one another, some of that crisis, some of that conflict, some of those fears may begin to dissipate. Since 2007, Abraham Path Initiative has worked with local communities to develop more than 2,000 miles of walking trails. These trails are now locally owned and operated. They're in Sinai, in Palestine, in Jordan, in Turkey, and in Iraq. Today, we're going to meet two people that plan to walk many of the legs of these trails that we've helped develop, all the way eventually from Iraq to Sinai, but not necessarily in that order. We want you to be part of that conversation. So if you look at your control panel, you'll see a place that says Q&A, and we'd like you to write your questions in there, and I'll make sure that your questions get to our panelists. So let's move on with the show. Our guests today are Daniel Maissan, a photographer, and Lisa Dupuy, a journalist. Welcome to both of you.
Hello, hi.
Hello. Hi, so they're joining us. You're joining us from Amsterdam and its environments.
Yep.
We've got a lot of snow here in New Jersey today. What's it like in Amsterdam?
It's just passed. We were snowed in only last week. So that was a singular occurrence.
Apparently this weekend it's going to be really good weather.
So no ice skating on the canals these days, huh?
No more. No. So last weekend that was still possible, and then not anymore.
Okay.
So, singular event.
Singular, indeed. Danielle, you work as a freelance photographer and artist. You focus on people and personal stories. You know, why people? Why not architecture, landscape, botany, things that don't talk back?
I like it when they talk back. It's, for me, photography started out as a way for me to get my curiosity out, and the curiosity mostly goes to other people and other cultures and different countries. So it was the obvious choice.
And Lisa, you've worked also freelanced extensively around the world. You have bylines from Peru, Nepal, Ukraine, Southwest Asia. How do you get comfortable when you go to new places?
Well, those are actually Daniel's bylines.
Wow. My associate producer gave me the wrong information. Oh, wait, I am the associate producer. So,
I know. But I wish I'd gone to all of those places. I've worked I've worked a lot around Europe and in Africa.
In Africa. So how do you get comfortable?
Language is, well, it's an important part of the outcome of the stuff that I put out. But it's also important for me when I try and connect with people. I try and learn people's languages. And I'm not afraid, I would say, to make a fool of myself. So I'll probably jumble up your language, but then hopefully it'll make you laugh. And then that's a good starting point.
I find that a smile and a laugh often helps, you know, something.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, because I've done a bunch of that kind of work myself. I spent most of my career in television news and documentary filmmaking. Daniel, what are your tricks about getting comfortable in Peru, Nepal, Ukraine?
Well, I guess what Lisa was saying, trying to at least know a few words helps a lot. And I guess I try to get to know people at first really quickly, but also it's my job to make them forget me as soon as I can, so that I can just walk around a bit and photograph whatever is happening at the moment with me interfering too much. So it's kind of a thin line that I try to walk.
Whereas Lisa, as an interviewer, as a journalist, you actually need to be part of the conversation. You need to be present.
I do. Yes. Yeah. And that's actually one thing I do feel, since it's my job to be asking questions, I should also make it my job to answer other people's questions. So as much as I want to talk to people, I appreciate if they want to talk to me also. So if I'm being impertinent and my subjects, for lack of a better word, they also get to be impertinent with me.
Excellent. There is some permission that we have as reporters, isn't there?
There is. Oh, yeah. Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
So for our audience, Daniel's work has been used, his photographs have been used by many international NGOs, and not NGOs, but I'm going to mention some of the NGOs such as War Child, Greenpeace, PAX, and Oxfam. And now we're going to share some of his work at the Abraham Path initiative on Meet Us on the Abraham Path. Lisa's credits include NRC and TRO and The Guardian Online, Deutsche Welle, is that how it's pronounced in German? Deutsch?
Yes, that's how I would pronounce it. And that's,
Welle.
you know, it's not a guarantee.
All right, and Impact magazine.
Yeah.
So we're very, very glad to have you both join us with your credentials and your work and your mission, what's in your hearts. So you call this current project Meeting Abraham.
Yeah.
You say it is slow journalism. Now, I've worked in the news media and there's a lot of rushing around. You know, it's just occasionally when you have to sit and have that cup of tea before you can ask the impertinent questions that you slow down. We're going to hear about cups of tea also on this show. So what is slow journalism?
Yeah, so slow journalism, it's as you say, it's almost an antidote or an anti-thesis to what is the 24-hour news drive. And I think I do a lot of daily news journalism also, a lot of just underground quick reporting. But going on a project like this, where we take a lot of time and we actually pay attention during what we would otherwise consider sort of the lost moments.
Mm-hmm.
Those are now sort of the main subjects of what we write about and what we try to understand. So we've turned upside down what is not news, but that does become our story. So it's the everyday things that would actually seem familiar to us and therefore not interesting, but we try and find, you know, not interesting in the general sort of 8 o'clock news. We try and find similarities rather than the singular events to talk to our audience about.
The continuities of real life, perhaps,
yes.
rather than the singular events that are hard-breaking news.
Exactly, yeah. And I those are important to understand, but it's also important to understand that people do live on in times of crises. And there's just regular people's lives happening and unfolding behind what we know as the big headlines.
What can you add to that, Danielle?
Well, it's perfectly laid out there. It's for me, I haven't been working as a journalist per se, more documentary. So for me, the way of working always was a little bit slower paced, and was more about a story behind big projects and stuff. So yeah, and this project is maybe even slower as we do it on foot.
Yeah, I
And,
was going to ask about that. What degree does the walking have to do with the slowness?
Well, you can imagine that for press as well as for most NGOs, it's quite normal that time is money. So basically, whenever they go somewhere, they come by car, they stay somewhere, do whatever they need to do, either report or help in any way they can, and after that they leave immediately. And as we walk into the various places that we visit, people often know beforehand already that we're coming because, well, news travels faster than we do on foot. So the curiosity from there is from them is something that is also helping us to connect in a different way.
All right, so get into more about what it is you're connecting. What is this Meeting Abraham concept? What are you trying to do?
Well, I heard about the Abraham Path initiative quite a few years ago of Gurjan, and it just stuck with me as an idea, but I didn't know really what to do with it. And then a couple of years back, I met Lisa during a training for journalists, and I told her about the whole concept and the fact that I was really eager to walk the route, and well, she switched on as well. So then we decided, why not do it? And here we are. By now we have done 2 legs and hopefully a few more to come.
And just so you know, Gurjan, who introduced you to our work, is on the call with us today. So thank you, Gurt. You've walked in Jordan and you've walked in Turkey. Let's get some insight into your journey to Jordan.
First, say one quick thing. It's actually because I want to touch upon where we've walked in and what we call that region, because you've just made the point at the start of your talk or of this webinar that there's a way to think of the region as the Middle East, and there's a way to think of it as part of the Asian continent.
Yes.
And that's actually a very interesting notion to us. So we're very aware of that we're walking in a space where things happen. And it's the things that happen are either people living their daily lives, or we can look at it through the lens of the Middle East, big place of conflict. So we do call it the Middle East because we're interested actually in bringing those stereotypes along with us, in seeing what remains of them once we put ourselves almost literally in the people's shoes that we meet. And it gives us a chance to also talk to people in the region about the stereotypes and how they feel reflected in those.
That's great. That's a very good use.
Just wanted to
of
highlight.
Political construct. Thank you, Lisa. Very good, because it's conscious, it's intentional. Yeah, yeah. Well, take us there with you.
So we start with our first stage that we did in October 2019 in Jordan. We did parts of the Jordan Trail, and unfortunately for some periods we did them reversed, so we walked from the south up to the north. There is a reason that most people do it from the north to the south, because if you do it from the south to the north, there's a lot more climbing involved. The good thing was that we started, at least for me, we started in the south with Wadi Rum, which is a big desert area. And this is immediately one of the presumptions that Lisa was talking about earlier on. For me, the Middle East as such, which I'd never been to, even though, as you mentioned, I'd been quite around. I always pictured it as a lot of desert and such. So for me, it was kind of confirming, at least at the start what I thought it would be. So yeah, we walked a lot here. We actually spent even a couple of nights in the desert, in a beautiful a place. It was really, really nice to stay there. And from there, sorry, from there we went up to Petra, which is by most people very well known, as it is. It's a beautiful place to go. So you want to tell something about it, Lisa?
Sure. Yeah. So we've spent a fair few days in Petra, which is mostly thanks to Ibrahim. This is one of the Ibrahims that we've met on the trail or in our project. And looking for Ibrahim is actually one of the things that drives our project forward. We're interested in borrowing this name that has such an importance in the three big religions. And by looking for Ibrahims, we're actually hoping to find as much hospitality as we can. And this Ibrahim, 29-year-old, so he's my age, he certainly delivered. We've spent 2 or 3 nights with him, met the extended family and most of his friend group. We just had a couple of really good days hanging out and learning how Ibrahim and his family get by on the tourism trade. But then they also were kind enough to sort of reveal part of the traditional Bedouin life that they've hung on to, and their lives in caves, which is what Petra traditionally was, or was so many years ago. It was cave dwellings. And so we've been lucky enough to see some of those and see what young people try and make of this life that's sort of in between tradition and modern life coming at them. So that was really quite spectacular. We felt like true adventurists.
Yeah, and from there we traveled on from Petra. The last picture that you saw was like the end of Petra, but there was a back door, so to say, where you can go on foot onto Little Petra, and from there we walked all the way up to Dana, which was a 4-day hike. And
let me just interrupt you for one moment. Let me just say that interesting, most people who show Petra will show the picture of what's called the Treasury Building. And you showed the view from the Treasury Building toward the big canyon that leads in. I found that fascinating. Little Petra, for those who haven't had the chance to go, is actually a suburb of the big Nabatean city of Petra, and it's called Beda. And from what I understand, it's where the richer people lived, as we do in communities outside the major cities often. And but it had all of the same waterworks and supply that the Nabatean engineers managed for 400 to 600 years in that civilization. So thank you. And Dana is in Jordan. It's a nature reserve.
Yes.
So yeah. So you take it from there.
Well, to get to Dana first, we had to cross, like you see here, quite some rocky desert, mountain kind of environment. We were accompanied by a guide with, luckily, a donkey as well, because we stayed under the stars every night, preparing our own meals and well, basically sleeping on the ground with a nice fire, and waking up like this early in the morning, which was quite the experience. After Dana, we walked a bit further, and as you can see, still quite rocky, but slowly it became a little more with plants and trees. As you can see all the way on the left, it wasn't always that easy. But
so this is what I imagine. Well, this is what I imagine it looks like for Daniel, looking behind him every now and then, if we're on these big hiking days, I tend to trail or lag a little bit behind him because he's much taller than I am and he has much longer legs. So I often feel like I'm sort of the little mouse trying to trail and figure out his footsteps. So then every now and then, thankfully, Daniel does look back to wonder where his much smaller companion has strayed.
They're beautiful photo opportunities. And of course, we are very, very supported by, like I said before, news travels fast, even in quite desolate areas. And I cannot count the amount of times that we are met with friendly people and a lot of tea, which happens to be something that I really truly love. Like we said, most of it is done on foot, but we're not strict on that. So in some cases, it's either the road won't be interesting enough, or there's other reasons why we hop into a public transport, even if traveling with people that we meet who happen to take a bus, or sometimes suddenly a car stops next to us and says, "Where are you going? You shouldn't be walking. Come with us," and we hitch a ride for them. So here we go with what it's all about for us, at least part of it, meeting the different Ibrahims. You take this one, Lisa?
Yes, sure. So the finding of Ibrahims is a recurring sort of little quest that we have whenever we leave for a hike or for a separate stage. And so this is in Karak, still Jordan. And what we'll do is we'll walk into any dwelling or city or a village that we come across on the trail, and we just ask around. So whoever we feel would be open to talk to us, we ask them, "Do you know Ibrahim?" And it's one of the continuous delights to find out that people are first taken aback by the question, but then some form of very enthusiasm, helpfulness awakens in them. So we have entire dwellings and entire villages sort of collaborating and working together, trying to crack their brains and saying, "Wasn't there a teacher called Ibrahim? Well, he's working, so we don't want to disturb him. There's the baker. His son's grandchild is possibly named Ibrahim. Let me see if I can make sure that he shows up." So here in Karak, this clothes maker who was actually helping clients told us, "You know, if you're looking for an Ibrahim, just sit down in my shop, give me a few minutes, and I'll make sure I'll squirrel up a guy that's suitable for your strange project."
Not before he said that he wanted a photo as well. He wondered why the project was about Ibrahim and not Mahmoud. But we said Mahmoud can be in the picture as well, as he's a very important person for us to find Ibrahim.
And this is Mahmoud, who is standing at the counter.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
And did he offer you tea?
Of course, you see it in the middle of the picture.
He almost offered us a new outfit, but then, you know, we didn't have time for that. So in the end, Mahmoud's neighbor from across the street is called Ibrahim, but he did say, "I haven't seen him in his shop for a little while, so you might have to go and visit him at home." So that's what we did. We were brought across town, and Ibrahim had been ill with a hernia. He'd been at home for 3 months. And he is a butcher, so his butchery had been closed for the same amount of time. But his family were very gracious, although completely stupefied, to find us on their doorsteps, and they let us in. And so that's quite spectacular. Just by asking for someone's name and asking to know them, we find ourselves in quite intimate situations. This is a man who's been ill for so long. He's not been outside, but he's happy and definitely willing to invite us into his living room.
And there we had to wait for a bit because, well, obviously we didn't speak the language that well, and they didn't speak any English. So they phoned for the brother of Ibrahim, who 10 minutes later arrived, and he was reasonably good in English. So we spent another hour having conversation, which was really, really nice. And also, the fun part is that here you see the house of Ibrahim, and as you can see, it's all the way on the edge of the town, which would normally be a place where you won't find yourself quickly. In the back, you see the castle. Karak is well known for its castle, and people go there to see that and maybe see the tourist shops and walk around a bit. But it's good fun to end up in places of a small town like this that you would normally not find.
So the hope is that by finding different Ibrahims, we'll be able to sort of arrive at some sort of a cross section of all of the communities that we meet or that we walk past. And so it's a delight to see a collection of really young Ibrahims. I think in all of our travels so far, we've snapped a photo of a newborn, and to see older ones. And we meet their families and their wives and their sisters. And so we get a great collection of people.
And we can't do it without any helping hands, which sometimes come completely unexpected. So that they can be entrepreneurs like Hussein was when we sat in his restaurant and decided that we needed to see different parts of Madaba, where we were at the time. And they can be the guides that show us around. This was all the way in the north of Jordan, walking from Kais to Ajlun. Also a 4-day hike.
Yeah, so we'll find trail angels, who are people that have time or the resources, or who are just as curious as we are, who just enjoy thinking with us, and trying to figure out some of these stories behind the headlines. There's Isa here, who is a well-known Ibrahim Path contributor.
Yeah, he was with us in 2009 when I first walked on the Abraham Path in Jordan, as it was called at that time. Now it's the Jordan Trail. Exactly. And he was a guest on one of our webinars early during the pandemic.
Oh, that's great. Well, he was a great host.
And Isa, interestingly, means Jesus in Arabic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also here you see a colleague of ours in Amman, a Jordan journalist, who helped us to get to Satari, which was a refugee camp all the way in the north as well, for Syrian refugees. And in Satari, again, we walked around and met up with some Ibrahims as well.
So sometimes the trail angels are also colleagues, so people that spend some time with us, and they become team members. Actually, I think in the fast 24-hour news world, you'd call them fixers, but we prefer to call them team members. So we have someone who knows the culture, who knows the communities that we might be working in or coming across, and who look forward to trying to find a different type of story with us to tell.
And do they ask you why Ibrahim?
For me, at first it was the idea of walking the path was already there. I mean, that was something I really, really wanted to do. And when I told Lisa, she immediately jumped up and said, yes, I want to go there. I want to know, I want to see, especially with her interest that she brought from her job and her experiences. And for me, it was, I needed a red line to tell the story I wanted to tell. And for me, the story that I wanted to tell is that wherever you go in the world, basically a person is a person. Of course, they have their religions and they have their politics system and their cultural heritage, etc., etc. But when it comes down to sitting down with them and talking and having a cup of tea, they end up being people. And I wanted to find a way to convey that with images. And I figured, well, we're walking the Ibrahim path. We heard from Gertjan and also later on from several people that we spoke to when preparing for this project, that we would still meet a lot of Ibrahims along the way, explaining why the path existed in the first place, as it is some sort of a peace path, as it is a patriarch for every religion and every culture that lives in this region. And I figured, how nice would it be if we take that as an anchor, if you wish, to photograph people that all have the same name, so that diversity is already gone. And especially on our website, on the website that we build, we made some sort of mosaic in which you can see the photos of the people, but you, at first glance, you can't see from which part of the Ibrahim path they come. So you have it's an Ibrahim, that they live in the Middle East, but you have no idea whether they're from Iraq or Turkey or Syria or whichever country. And I really like that idea of all of a sudden them being an Ibrahim and nothing more than that.
How many miles or how many kilometers did you cover?
So about 400. So if we're talking kilometers,
kilometers?
yeah. So if we're talking kilometers, sort of our rule of thumb is the entire notion of the path is about 4,000 kilometers or a little under. So we'll divide that into a number of stages, and 400 kilometers, we could walk that in about 4 weeks, which allows us to take our time and be slow about it. Mm-hmm. It's also that's a chunk of time that we can afford to budget for, as it's an autonomous project. So there's a couple of logistics that we're trying to juggle.
That was 2019 in your first jaunt. Big difference in 2020, the COVID virus, and yet you went to Turkey. How did you manage that?
Luckily, it was still possible. We were allowed to, and we are helped by Petra, who is a well-known person when it comes to journalist security here in the Netherlands. And he also mentioned that it was safe enough for us to go, like conflict-wise and stuff. So we figured out, can we started a money-raising idea to get the funds for it, and also applied for some funds. And it all panned out right.
It panned out in the pandemic. So you went and you walked another some 300-400. We're going to see some. Take us to Turkey. You're going to show us some of your Turkey journey, which I suppose one of the biggest differences would have been you were masked, and so were they. So were your Ibrahims in many cases, right?
We wore masks for a good portion of time, not always, but actually, I looking back now, I realized we were very lucky to be able to be gone for a month. While even in the Netherlands, I would be talking to my parents on the phone, and they were like, do stay there. If that's where you can have an adventure right now, do stay, because it's getting boring with our lockdowns.
Right,
So
and this was
lucky.
again in the fall, right? So about a year from when you traveled to Jordan.
It was also October.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had.
Sorry.
I was going to say we had planned on going earlier, But just as we had secured our working grants, the world did shut down with lockdowns. And so we sat around for a little while trying to readjust and then decided to just go. So we ended up going again in the fall.
And just for our viewers, this map that you're looking at is a map of a story of the journey of Abraham Ibrahim, as much as we at Abraham Path Initiative in our research could pull it together, that his story started, and maybe you'll follow this with your cursor, Danielle, in Mesopotamia, and he would have traveled up the Tigris River Valley to cities that now are Erbil in Iraq, Diyarbakir and Urfa are in today's Turkey, Aleppo, Homs, Damascus. These are all cities in today's Syria. And then coming south, you recognize the Negev Desert, you recognize Sinai, travel westward. Part of the Abraham story goes to a visit to Pharaoh in Egypt. And then part of the Abraham story actually is Ibrahim taking his wife Hagar to Mecca with their son Ismail, and you know, pretty much being part of the beginning of the big city of Mecca and building. It says Ibrahim and Ismail in the Quran. It says, you know, raised the foundations of the Kaaba, toward which Muslims pray today. So it contains all of these various narratives, and so we've collected a lot of oral history along with the scriptural and written histories along the way.
One of the things that was actually quite interesting about this stage that we walked is that we got to start at Sanliurfa, which is, I would suppose, one of the two contenders for Ibrahim's place of birth. So that was quite spectacular for us, actually, to see how, even still in a straightforward religious sense, this figure really is a prophet and really does draw a lot of very pious and respectful people to what is known as his birth cave. So that was the start of our hiking project in 2020, the Sanliurfa.
And again, it was very different. As I mentioned before, we in Jordan we did a lot of the mountain trails and through the deserts and the rocky deserts. And in Turkey, a lot more roads, just roads were followed, as we didn't, especially the first stage, we didn't have a guide. So a lot was done on Google Maps and trying to find the smallest roads that we can find on Google Maps, as long as we were secure of the big Turkish shepherds not being in the way, which was one of our big fears.
We have a question here from Susan Berggren asking what kind of obstacles did you encounter along the way, if any? And I think we're going to come to some of those obstacles, aren't we?
Listen, the guard dogs are... So actually, Daniel and I thought we'd be nervous about stray dogs. Turns out the stray dogs generally they're huge, but they're fine. It's the ones that belong to people that are ready to tear your head off. If they don't think that your human is okay with, or their human is okay with you being around. So that's we've spent a fair couple of miles. Just
mind you, these dogs in like the Turkish shepherds, if they stand on their hind legs, their face will be in mine, and I'm 1.90 meters, so they're huge and very, very scary.
Yeah, so that's a big obstacle.
Well, the fear was definitely...
The fear of them actually is maybe even the biggest one, yeah.
So yeah, the first 4 days we walked from Sanliurfa all the way to Gaziantep. And there we kind of got stuck a little bit for a little bit as we tried to figure out what was next.
Yeah, so a lot of things can actually be obstacles, right? Like we spent a lot of time together. There's physical obstacles possible. There's having to lug your own stuff around, having to get along with each other. We generally do a very good job of that, but still. And there's the planning and logistics of things. So our project is pretty spontaneous, but we still want to try and get stories out. So sometimes that sort of conflicts with, especially mine. I think that's especially my sort of intention or inclination is to still plan for stories and to figure out what's interesting here. So that's the thing that we have to contend with.
We have a note here from Carol Pucci that her husband and she visited Urfa and Diyarbakir a few years ago. She says, many Turkish people warned them not to go to these areas, but they were very generously welcomed and thoroughly enjoyed the visit. She says, once travel opens up again, she'd encourage people to go. Thank you for that.
That's great,
So,
yeah. Diyarbakir is still on our list.
Yeah. I just have, she mentioned it was she and her husband. Now, some of these places you visited are fairly traditional communities, traditional societies. Were you sharing, I'm going to be the impertinent reporter now, are you sharing rooms in hotels? How do people react? What is your relationship?
Silence.
Shall I take it?
Yeah, you start. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, like mentioned before, we met each other on a course, so we're good friends, and yeah, it's a thing that we walked into many times in Jordan and in Turkey, and we found out that oftentimes it's just best to say that we're married, which
Or to
we're
not
not.
address it actually until asked.
Hmm.
Right? I think we try and not talk about it too much. But yeah, some places it's implied that we'd have to be married to be able to get a room together. And I think actually in Turkey, I'm trying to think where it was. It would have been around Iskenderun, I think, that we really had trouble trying to get a room.
Biricek as well.
And Biricek also, yes, trying to get a room, just the two of us without having the marriage license, which we made work in the end. There's a lot of negotiation. And I think the word team member, or the term team member, actually, that's one that gets across a lot of that really sort of sketches the way that our relationship is for other people, especially I think other young people. They tend to be slightly more forward and open-minded, I suppose. So that's a word that goes a long way in describing who we are as a duo.
Yeah, because that's some negotiation.
Yes.
As a man and woman traveling together in that region.
Yeah, and like Lisa said, the best way we try to cope with it is try to avoid the whole subject as much as we can anyway.
Yeah, just let people's presumptions reign. Yeah.
So here we look at some of the people that we meet along the way. Like said before, news travels fast. Everywhere we come, people are so friendly and they try to welcome us, which was kind of strange in a way as well, because it happened very, very, very often everywhere, same as in Jordan, but also in Turkey again. The interesting thing in Turkey only was that every time when we had this wonderful time with people, having tea, having lunch often, people in the end would always say, but be careful when you continue. Not everybody is as kind as we are. So for us, that kind of hospitality conflicted with the distrust they sometimes had for their very neighbor, and it was a very interesting notion to see, because literally everybody was like this, welcoming us with food and walking with us to show us the way, or to at least let us out of the village. Always ready for conversation.
Which proves our point, actually, quite often, is that if you make the trouble yourself than of coming to a place and asking the questions and trying to reach out, then people will actually return that behavior. They'll reflect that behavior. So that's funny actually, that it was Susan, right? Susan who said that she'd been it had been disadvised or ill-advised to go to Sanliurfa. And that's something that we would also get, but then oftentimes when you're in a place itself, outlooks are completely different.
Well, to that point, Arwen Scholten asks, doesn't it help to meet people as a man and a woman, make it easier to talk to strangers?
It does in other, yes, yeah, it can, definitely. I think, I think women can often get along easier with other women, or it's easier for them to have other women open up to them. And also Danielle and I have a bit of an age difference, which I actually think also plays out to our advantage. So if you take an average group of people, men and women, there's the two of us actually cover a broad swath of them. They're either men, or they're young men, or they're women, or they're older women, and so that makes it possible for us to, well, I don't want to say play, but to play onto these people in different ways, and to connect with them different parts of their experience, as they do with us, obviously, also.
Sure. Yeah.
And in the end, it even makes it possible. This was, for example, in Suruc, where it turned out that the only hotel that they had was booked full with teachers because of the COVID pandemic. And we ended up with the family at their home. They invited us to stay over there for a night, which was great.
That's a wonderful picture. Brings up, we have an attendee who wanted to know, Lisa, how often, and I'm thinking of the woman who in the picture before the great shot with the children, who had her hair covered. Probably if Danielle weren't there, she would not have had her hair covered, right? Because she would have been with her family and only sure. You as a woman. So how often did you feel the need to cover your hair?
Not too often at all. There's been a few instances we've had some meetings with imams and village elders that it makes perfect sense for me to cover my hair as a sign of respect, which I always could do, right? So I think I have also asked at some occasions people wanted me to cover it. But as we were walking, for instance, I would often have my hair in a cap or pull it up. It usually looks like a right mess anyway, so I think people generally just feel fine having me walking around with my crow's nest of hair. So I've not had too many. We've had very few instances where we were really sort of addressed to fix the way that we look or to make sure that we fit in better. But I do always wear long sleeves, for instance. There's no low cut things, more or less baggy pants. So with those sort of wardrobe fixes, I've been able to get away with that, but the hair has not been an issue so far. But it probably will be at some point, which is also not an issue. You can it's an easy thing to follow up on.
Where are we now?
We're in Rahanle, which is on the border with Syria, and this was by this time we had a fixer with us, Shadi, which was amazing. And so now, especially like Lisa mentioned before, we could also make some stories that would not develop along the way, but we could actually arrange beforehand. This was one of those stories. This is what's it called, Lisa? Rehabilitation house.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
For people from Syria who come to Turkey to go to the hospital, but they can't go back immediately because they have to have several treatments or they have to stay until they're better. So we could talk to the administration of the building, the director of the building. Here in the left, you see Shadi. And the brilliant thing of Shadi was that he is Syrian, but lives in Turkey for more than 10 years. So he was fluent in Turkish and in Arabic and in English as well. And amazing to me up to this day, not only in language, but also in customs. So, for example, the story of a man and a woman staying in a hotel, like we mentioned before, to him that was a no-brainer because that was normal from his English brain side. But you could see him switch within the moment as soon as he talked to somebody Turkish to also take the customs and the habits of the culture, and same with the Arabic culture. So that was very, very helpful for us. And in this rehabilitation center, we were able to also visit some of the patients. Most of them also called Ibrahim, because we told the director, of course, about our project, and he immediately started thinking with us and saying like, oh, we should visit those and those and those. So here, for example, this girl is waiting in the rehabilitation center until they get a clearance from the EU, because she needs to be operated outside of Turkey. And this boy is waiting until he can go to Istanbul because of a failing heart condition.
And he is Ibrahim, this boy?
This is also Ibrahim.
The girl's father was Ibrahim?
Yeah, and the girl's father was Ibrahim, and this is also Ibrahim. He's a Syrian boy who lost his hearing due to the bombing near his village, and basically is being taught how to speak and listen again. So, and here you see how close we were from the border. Here you see literally the white wall, which is the border to Syria.
Yeah, so Syria is one of those things that we're trying to get a handle on. We'd love to go and see as much of it as we could, but obviously it's still a very volatile and changing situation. But we've already, even walking in Jordan and walking in southern Turkey, it's been clear that we can't really escape the consequences and the repercussions or the implications that the conflict in Syria has on these neighboring countries.
As Lisa mentioned, because we're close to the border and a lot of people were still figuring out what it was that we were doing, in Turkey we encountered many Jandarma police officers, and every time we did go off-road instead of like this one, we were met with Jandarma. Either they were called by people that were living there, or they were patrolling in the neighborhood for possible terrorists, etc. So this is one of the roads, for example, that when we were studying this wildlife, all of a sudden there was this four-wheel drive stopping next to us with 4 police officers, and yeah, I think 20 minutes later we were sitting on the police station, not able to walk onwards. At first that was a little bit scary, but by the time that we were a bit further in the stretch, we had visited 4 or 5 police offices, and we were getting used to it, to be honest.
So I think when it comes to the Abrams path and what it is meant to sort of show, and it being a reminder of our shared humanity and the possibility of finding peace within that, I think that's a very interesting aspect to us, is that we're noticing a lot of hospitality and kindness on an individual level. And then every now and then, it turns out that we cannot quite escape some of these political Middle Eastern issues and conflicts. And so that's really what I see us doing, is basically navigating between those two different planes of understanding of what the region is going through and what it is like to live there.
Anouk Goossens wants to know, what is the most memorable moment that you've experienced along the way, if it's possible to pick one? You've already shared any number of memorable moments. You may not have the same one.
Hi, Anouk. That's a friend of mine. There's one thing that's immediately made an impact on me, and that's stuck with me to the point where I dreamt about it for a few nights straight when we were still working on the trail, which was actually in the rehabilitation house that was shown, which ties in actually also the question about being a woman on this project. We were let into the women's care wing, where I stepped in. So it was sort of like the one woman delegation of our little research party, to go into a room where there was, I think 7 or 8 beds that were occupied by women medical refugees from Syria, who are all suffering from cancer, and had been brought over the border to be able to receive treatment over in Reyhanli. That was very, very impressive. One of the women there who was able to speak a little English, and she really sort of presented herself as willing to do translation for the rest of her sort of roommates. And she was my age, and it was the 3rd time that she'd come across the border for her 3rd treatment of cancer. And that was a very sort of impressive meeting with her and with the other women in that room also. So that is definitely something that stuck with me for a couple of days. I mean, I still think about her quite a lot, actually, because she was so open and very, very comfortable. And actually she was fully covered, as were a lot of the women in the center.
You mean
a lot of
fully including her face?
Yes, yeah, full veil, yeah. But had no issue with me stepping in with my dirty clothes, my ragdoll hair, and asking a couple of dumbfounded questions that me being stupefied of where I was finding myself, which is, it's such a privilege to be able to be shown into rooms like that.
And did you stay in touch with her, or do you stay in touch with, and we'll get to your experience, Daniel, in just a moment, but do you stay in touch with any of the people that you've met along the way?
We do. Yeah, unfortunately, not this particular girl. I'm still kicking myself over it. I realized too late that we were already being ushered out of the room. But if we take people's portraits, especially the Ibrahims, but also other people that ask us for a photo on the way, we try and take down their contact details. So the very least that we can do is send them their photo. And there's a couple of other people that we stay in touch with. And there's one, actually, the family with all of the kids that you saw sitting on the couch. We've been in touch with them also. One of the things for them is to tell us that they've had a daughter and that they've named her Lisa, which I think I have to mention here because it's a crazy thing.
Well, that's memorable.
I know, yeah. I'm sorry, Daniel, I'll give you the floor.
No, that is very memorable. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. There's so many memorable moments in Jordan. One that comes to mind now, because I've just been writing it down today, is in Turkey. Though it was in the last week, just before we were leaving. We were in this little village where we decided to go by car because we didn't want to bump into more police officers anymore. And we were just roaming this little village for a little bit, and I looked into this little courtyard, and it was full of red peppers. drying in the sun. And there were two ladies sitting there cleaning it. And when they saw me peeking in, immediately we were invited, and it's not even within 10 minutes, we were sitting in a table that was completely full with food and drinks and everything. And they had so much fun, and it was such a ball. And one of the reasons, to be honest, this was possible, I think, is because they were the only ones home with their daughters. The men were out working. So all of a sudden, even for me, because most of the time contact with women is done through Lisa. In a rare occasion, I can still photograph, but only after the first contact is made with Lisa. And in this case, that was not necessary, because we were immediately invited in. So that was a very beautiful moment. And I ended up walking out with a 5-liter jar of the dried pepper paste that they make there, which was awesome.
Yeah, I bet you finished that up pretty quickly.
Which is just also to point out that even though the project is called Meeting Ibrahim, and a lot of the formal portraits that, you know, end up in this mosaic of guys called Ibrahim, thankfully we still have a lot of interaction with the women also, and they're just as important a part of the project.
Yeah, just like we think about it, the Abraham Path Initiative was Sarah and it was Hagar and their other servants who were cooking and making the hospitality possible. But you know, the patriarch gets so much of the credit. So we were, you know, looking at how do we balance some of that. There's one really short question that I don't want to let this one go by. John wants to know, he says, you mentioned hospitality involving tea, but I didn't hear you talk about coffee. How is the coffee?
Oh my God, thank you for asking this question.
Lisa, this is all yours.
We found some pretty good stuff. Yeah. I've had some really good coffee in Madaba and Amman in Jordan. I've had some Turkish coffee that was also pretty good. I think most of the people that we find, if we're out hiking on the trail, so that would be sheep herders or farmers taking a break, most of them will brew tea. But there's definitely coffee to be found.
Thank you both for your gracious participation and description and invitation to us to open our hearts and our minds and participate in this journey with you, even just a little bit. It brought me back.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's true pleasure. So at the end of our thank yous, the three of us are going to go off camera and let you enjoy a beautiful montage of photographs of Ibrahim's and some of their ancillary Sarah's and Hagar's made by Danielle. And I'm so grateful to you for providing this as a show closer for us.